Hello Cheeky, welcome to the channel. If you haven't been here before, please do like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. And check back as we kind of poke fun at the music industry, see what's been going on, have a bit of a laugh with it. When was the last time anyone in the music industry had a laugh? A while ago, I feel. So yeah, like, subscribe, share, do all that. So today's the day that I officially become a Swiftie. Or maybe not, we'll see. Anyway, we're going to talk about Taylor Swift. Because recently we came to the end of a very, very long-running music industry saga. So Taylor Swift has very recently bought back all of her masters. Her entire back catalogue, all of her eras, I believe is what they call them. Look at me pretending like I don't know what they're called. But yeah, essentially what she has done now is she has bought back the masters for all of her previous back catalogue, which was previously owned by Big Machine, which was Scooter Braun's label. So this has been a massively kind of ongoing thing. Prevailing sentiment is that the record label is kind of in the wrong, they shouldn't own this artist's work, and that the record labels are big and evil, bad record labels who are stifling the creativity of your favourite artist, right? But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to present an alternative, more considered answer to this, right? I mean, won't anybody think of the poor record labels who are just hand in mouth like, please sir, please feed me, I'm dying. And we're going to speak a little bit about what we can learn from this entire process, whether you're an artist or whether you're on your own record label or whether you just work in music more generally. So, quick explanation on what this all means, right? What does owning your masters mean? So essentially, what would kind of historically and traditionally happen is if a record label is going to invest in an artist or sign an artist, they sign a record and they own the masters of that record. I won't go too much detail into kind of masters versus sort of publishing and so on and so forth, but essentially what this means is if you're a record label and you sign an album deal with an artist, you split the royalties of that record, usually 50-50 between the record label and the artist. But even though the royalties are split 50-50, whoever owns the master, which is typically the record label, they actually own the copyright to that thing. And the benefit of this is that they are free to exploit that song or that album or that product in kind of whatever way they want. So they can sell it for various kind of sync. They can do whatever they want on the sync side. They can do whatever kind of promotion they need to do. They can sell the rights to it later on in order to make money, basically. The artist will still get 50% of whatever money is made, but they don't own it. So what's the problem here, right? You're still making loads of money if it does well. The problem for artists here is that they give up quite a strong element of control. So things that they don't have a say over is when the record will be released, how it will be released, what kind of budget goes into it. Another thing they don't get to control is kind of the expenses on that record. So the record label is able to charge lots of things back to the profit of the record. I won't go into too much details on this, but they don't have any control of that, right? And essentially what you're doing, in return for an investment, you're giving up quite a large element of control, right? So the narrative here is poor artist, bad for artists, really, really difficult. Everyone just keeps exploiting them. Their life is so hard, right? And in plenty of examples, that has been the case, right? But I must somewhat push back against the likes of your Taylor Swifts, the likes of your Rina Sawayama.
He also owns my masters! I've had it now!
Frank Ocean, and even as far back as people like Prince, who very much push on the narrative of the artist always gets screwed by this. You should absolutely always own your masters because the artist always gets screwed. It's just, that's not entirely true, right? So let me give you the reason why record labels do this. Why is it that this happens, right? The cold hard fact of the matter is that record labels have far more misses than they have hits. On average, in a big record label, on average, only 10% of artists recoup, that means break even, on their first album, right? Only 10%. In some cases, it's as low as kind of 5 or 3%, right? So record labels are playing a long odds game with artists. There's a lot of musicians and a lot of labels out there who have had quite a lot of money spent on them, and it just hasn't worked, right? You're always taking a bet. And what you do is, or what most record labels do, is they're playing the long game, hoping on that one big bet coming through. A Taylor Swift or a Frank Ocean or whoever, right? And then what happens is, once that big fish comes through and you have a record that's really, really hitting and an artist that's blowing up, right? The record label wants to be in position to maximize the profit on that. Don't forget, record labels they're not these big evil entities. They're made up of human beings, right? And more often than not, the A&R people, the marketing people, the promo people, whoever in these record labels, they love music. They love the artists, right? They all need to have a job, right? So what typically happens is once the big hits come through, like one artist can fund a record label for years, right? And then a lot of other smaller artists on the label just don't ever recoup, right? But what happens is, once artists get to the point where there's money to be made here and there's real like revenue coming through, then they want to own their masters, right? Then they're very, very clear that they want to own their masters at this point, right? Because I can promise you, artists whose record has died a death, they're not so keen on owning their masters because it hasn't worked. I'm generalizing, of course, but that is generally the way it goes. So there's this narrative of the poor artist, and that you should always own your masters, and absolutely you should not let a record label own your masters, right? And luckily nowadays there's lots of kind of options out there, right? You can go with like distribution deals whereby you get to keep you do keep your masters, but you're probably not going to get quite the same level of support as you would with a record label, or just do it all completely independently. But obviously that's going to require more kind of costs up front. So there is a lot more kind of options out there these days. The one thing that does kind of frustrate me a little bit is that the music industry seems to be the only industry where people are not held accountable to their signature quite as much. Or there seems to be more kind of general sympathy for decisions that adults have made, right? Let me give you an example, right? If you run a startup or you have a startup idea, it does well, gets off the ground, and then some investors come in, they're going to put a big down payment, they're going to pay for a load of stuff, they're going to do a load of work for you, they're going to help promote your startup, they're going to, do all the things that an investor would do, right? But in return, they want a controlling share of the business. You, as a startup owner, then have a decision to make. Do you want to continue independently, fund it all yourselves, do what you need to do, and maintain control? Or do you want to let in investors who will give you a cash bump, widen your horizons, but will take a certain amount of control? Now, if you're running a startup, neither of those is a bad idea. The only bad decision is not owning your decision. And it's the exact same with musicians. It's the exact same. So if you're going to be independent and you want to own your masters, you want to run your own team, if you're quite a driven person and you're quite organized and you feel quite capable of being the captain of your own ship, i.e. speak to promoters, speak to press people, speak to people who can help you with your social media and your advertising, have a manager, have tour managers, do all of that and kind of be a CEO of your own business or your own startup, which all musicians are, then cool. Try and go independently, right? And try and find sort of investment opportunities that don't eat into your master share and stuff like that, right? Cool, that's a great route for you. But if you're not like that, and there's something wrong with not being like that, right? If you're just a musician who makes music and all you want to do is make music and you're good at it and that's what you want to focus your time doing, then taking investment, which is what a record label ultimately is, they invest in assets, that might be the right way to go. You still get 50% of everything that happens, but you took on investment and they're going to have slightly more of a controlling share of it now. Or try and negotiate somewhere in the middle, right? But own your decision. Whatever way you go, make sure it's right for you. Make sure you've had lawyers look through it and skim every last word to make sure that everything's fair and you're happy with everything, and then own your decision. I do kind of take umbrage to people, to grown adults who will sign something and then will sort of perform outrage at the thing that they signed and agreed upon. So there we go. The main takeaway from this, I suppose, is be an adult a little bit. Not all record labels are these evil entities. They're not all just vampires. What happens in record labels is they take bets, and a lot of those bets fail, but you're hoping for that one big win, really. And that might be one release a year. And in between those, trust me, because I've run one, you lose a lot of money.